Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from September 3rd, 2023, and I'm recording this on February 29th, 2024. As always, I give you those dates so you know when this information is most relevant, because the market is always moving and changing, as we'll see when we look at these price differences. As always, also, we're looking back at froze for a second. As always, also, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hot Trending Comics of the Week, only we're not this week. This was the week where CBSI transferred from the previous gentleman that was doing their list to somebody new. They took a week off in the transition, so there was no list from CBSI this week. So we just have the 10 books from Tom this week to talk about. So this will be a little shorter video with just 10 books, but let's dig into these 10 books, see what we can learn. What books should we have been chasing? What books should we have been patient on? And what factors should we have been looking at to make those decisions? So yeah, let's see what we can find out. First up, we got Sonic the Hedgehog, Endless Summer, #1, the 1 in 25 Natalie Hayes variant, this popsicle cover, basically a throwback to, like, if you were a kid like in the 80s, you'll remember these like ridiculously bad looking popsicles. So yeah, that's what this is throwing back to. Had a lot of nostalgia with this cover. Right out of the gate, this 125 was doing 50 to 80, so between double and triple ratio, which usually means it's going to end up at between single and double ratio. That's sort of where this one ended up. It's now a $45 to $55 book, so it didn't back up as much as typically you would see from one in this range. So it's only an I'll be back and not a trap, but it did definitely back up to the lower end of that previous range and a little bit lower than that. Next, we have Wolverine, #27, this iconic Jim Lee cover. Basically, this one was hitting the list because Jim Lee was doing a signing at CGC, which, why this cover of all his covers? I feel like there's much more iconic Jim Lee covers that people would be chasing, but they put it on the list. Raw copies back then were going for $25, 9.8 going for $180, and that's what the book is going for right now. So I'm wondering if it wasn't just a bunch of sales and no movement on price here. I didn't write that down at the time, but yeah, it's now a $15 to $40 book, 9.8, $190 to $200. So yeah, this is steady and worth it. I think that's pretty much. I didn't really look at the time, but my guess is this is pretty much just where this book sets. So there was a bunch of sales because of the signing, but not necessarily any movement in price back then. Next, we have X Factor, #1, from 1986. This was the return of the original X-Men team, basically after all those years with the new X-Men. They were introducing giant-sized X-Men. We got the original team back. This book was going for $10 back then, 9.8 going for $70 to $130, basically. And this is based on rumors that there'd be some sort of tie-in with this team in the Deadpool movie. I'm not sure exactly what that rumor was. I didn't get specific in my notes, which was a mistake, but I didn't do it. Now it's a $5 to $15 book, so basically the same price raws. 9.8, 67 to 90. So on the lower end of the 9.8 sales scale. So we're going to say steady, I'll be back. Still basically in the same range. Most of the sales are still raw copies, but you can definitely do a little bit better if you were patient. Look for a deal. All right, next we have Star Wars Clone Wars, #1, the first appearance of Ahsoka Tano. I just realized now I didn't organize these based on categories like I normally do. I just had listed them based on the video, I guess. So, first appearance of Ahsoka. Raw copies were going for $700 back then, 9.8 going for $15.30. Now it's a $200 to $800 book raw. 9.8, $11.50 to $1,500 on recent sales. So down and I'll be back. Borderline trap in a couple of them, but the high end of both ranges still are getting up to where they were kind of was at before. But this book has definitely come down some. It's definitely come down a ton from some of the peaks pre-show and in the original news about the show and that kind of stuff. But still goes for a pretty penny, a lot more than it was when I passed on a copy right before all that news broke. So, next we have Secret Wars #1. This is basically hitting the list because of the Secret Wars movie and spec that this is the story, more likely to be the storyline they follow than the original Secret Wars, because it has the incursion stuff and everything else that they'd hinted at during Doctor Strange. But back then, this is one of those Tom put on the list because there was a bunch of sales again, but it was way, way down even then from when the original Secret Wars announcement was made. But there was a bump in sales, but raw copies were only going for $5. 9.8s were going for 25. And my guess is that's almost probably what's caused it to be a little more now. It's a $5 to $15 book now, 9.8, 80. I think they were just kind of like reminding people. And then plus we got some of the recent stuff that, with the rumors about the comic book being in the Deadpool trailer, everything else, Secret Wars 5 being in a Deadpool trailer, that this is going to be a tie-in somehow. So this is up and worth it right now. I won't put straight cash on this, even though the 9.8 have jumped a lot. That $80 9.8 is not straight cash, but definitely up, worth it if you invested back then. All right, we're going to keep moving, and we have Amazing Spider-Man 121, The Death of Gwen Stacy. So this was a little bit of Sony spec around that we were going to get a Gwen movie of some sort, like whether it be like from the animated verse or something, that we were going to get a Gwen introduction. Not sure why Her Death was the book that was hitting the list, but it was 125 to 600 back then, 9.6 going for 1826. And this is exactly what this book is going for now, basically. 125 to 600 on recent raw sales. 9.6 is 1,400 to 2,000. This is a great book. It's only been steady and worth it over the last 6 months, but long term, obviously, this is a straight cash book. But yeah, great book. But really just going for what it's going. It was just a big increase in sales back then because people were thinking about Gwen being brought into getting her own spin-off from Across the Spider-Verse. Next, we have Free Comic Book Day, Avengers XMen from 2023. The first appearance of Wynn, a character that was supposedly going to be the focus of Hickman's Gods event, upcoming Gods event. I think that event might be up or is wrapping up. It might be already over. Back then, average was 0. Like, wait, what? They put it on the list because there was a 400% increase in sales. But when you factor in, if you buy something on eBay for like $2, and the shipping is factored in, the person selling it doesn't actually make any money. Like, they're basically, by the time they pay the eBay fees and everything else, they basically are all but losing money on something like that. So yeah, the average is that they're getting is $0. They're not making anything off of it. Now it's a $2 to $5 book, which is still basically an average of $0. Like, we're putting steady and worth it. I'm not even going to put, up in any way, shape, or form. This book is like, this is the bare minimum something can even sell on eBay and the person make like 15 cents. It's just the way it works. So yeah, this book is basically not worth anything. People are paying a little bit for it just to get it if they missed out on the Free Comic Book Day. Don't know that this event had really garnered any real attention. I haven't heard anybody talk about this event, even though there's a lot of Hickman fans out there. All right, next we have Star Wars, Kanan the Last Padawan, number 6. This is where I talked about I didn't have things, obviously, in order of categories. Because this is still going back to the Ahsoka show. First full appearance of Sabine, Hera, Ezra, and Chopper. Yeah, I know they appear in issue 1. They actually also appear very, very briefly again in issue 5. But anyway, this is the first full, also known as the cover appearance that people want. Back then, raw copies were going for 135, 9.8 going for 320. Now it's a $30 to $100 book, 9.8, 2 to 225. So yeah, this is a trap. All these characters are great characters, but this book is backed way up. Now that the show is come and gone, even though they're in the Star Wars universe now, another season of Ahsoka is coming. Doesn't matter. People aren't interested in this book at the same level they used to be. And this, even back then, the price was way down when the show finally came out from the original announcements. Which means it might be time for me to upgrade my copy, honestly. So, all right, next we have Wonder Woman number 800, the first appearance of Trinity. This was just a buzz because so she'd appeared in 800, and actual issue 1 of the new Wonder Woman run was coming out, which was Tom King, which we were going to get the backup Trinity stories, which we've been getting the whole time. Back then, raw copies were going for $6, which was basically cover price, but just a bunch of sales. Now raw copies are $4 to $10 online. 9.8 only costs you $40 of the A cover. So yeah, steady, worth it, I guess. Whatever, it's what I said back then, which is kind of the truth. Trinity's obviously, I will say, this current Tom King Wonder Woman run is fantastic. If you haven't been reading it, highly recommend it. But the Trinity backup stories haven't really done much for me yet. We will see if Trinity becomes anything. So far, they haven't really used her very much. So we'll see. And then our last book this week is Spawn 306, the NetherRealm variant. If you don't remember the story about this, it was hitting the list because the book came out in 2000. Supposedly, there was only 50 copies. It became one of the rarest Spawn variant. It was going for big money. People were paying like $5,000 for this thing. And then somebody found 70 copies and put them started selling them. And so this was why it was hitting the list, because there were huge sales here. But then as it was going on, there was rumors that there might be as many as 300 or 400 more copies out there of this book that was supposed to only be 50 copies. Back then it was going for raw copies. We're still going for 400, 9.8 going for 1,100. And yeah, as more of these copies continue to trickle out, this price has dropped considerably. Hasn't actually completely crashed, but close. $100 to $200 now for raw compared to the 400 back then. 9.8, 400 to 500 compared to the 1,100 back then. Reminder, 9.8s were going for 5,000 before that. Yeah, this is a dumpster fire. One of those limited variants that ended up being not so limited. All right, that is this week's list. Only 10 books, short video. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time. Later.